All right. Hi and welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming to our inaugural edition of our author spotlights. Today, we have the illustrious Kody Christiansen joining us to speak about his book, well, multiple books, but specifically LA Heartbreak, New York Dreams, Hollywood Heartbreak, New York Dreams. So we are going to get into that. And yeah, if you have any questions throughout the process, please feel free to post them in the chat. If you have anything you want to ask Kody directly, the chat is open for that. So we can get started. So first of all, Kody, I have a couple questions for you. I wanted to talk about your writing process. I know in the book, I did only read the first one. I still have to read the sequel, but I want to know, it seems like you got started writing with the process of this book and this memoir. Was there any point during middle school, high school, where you had any assignments where you had to write and you were like, oh, this is something that I can see myself doing. I can see myself becoming a writer?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I was in they called it peak English. It was like honors English in like junior high and high school. And so I was always like a writer. I always loved poetry. Um, and I always had this feeling that I was gonna write a memoir one day. Like I had some stuff happen to me in my senior year of high school, which I sort of talked about briefly in the book. My mother passed away. I was gay bashed and almost died. And then I went to New York shortly after graduating and became the world's most famous Britney Spears impersonator. So at that point, I was like, oh yeah, there's definitely going to be a book somewhere, sometime. Um, but yeah, it wasn't until I got sober that I was like, this is actually a story that I need to tell to like help other people.
Yeah, and I know you had put a couple of people throughout your journey had said you need to write a book about this, but you didn't choose to start actually writing it down until you had your journal and you started really going and when you started your sobriety process. Um, did you write anything before that? I know you said you were always a fan of poetry. Did you have any favorite poets, authors, anything like that who inspired your style?
So I don't think so. Like I wasn't the best student in like junior high and high school. I mean, I was like B's and A's and stuff. And I think like I used to draw comic books. Like I would make comic books and then so that's where my style of writing came from, I guess, or just like conversational. And I want to make sure that my books are accessible to everybody. So there's no jargon, as they call it in like science, in the science world. There's no like language that just people won't you have to. I don't want someone to stop and like pick up a dictionary to like read my books. I want people to just feel like I'm talking to them. um and so then I guess the this book just kind of came naturally after like what happened in the book. So but I think like one of the authors that really inspired the writing style in this book particularly was 50 Shades of Grey was like the most popular book during when I was writing this. So that's why there's some sexy scenes in here that are, well described because I was like, let's jump on that bandwagon. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. I did not see that coming, but I think having read that, that makes total sense. You had a lot of very steamy scenes.
I
Um,
mean, it's all true. It all happened. I just, used my 50 Shades of Grey lens to
right.
explain it.
Um, so jumping back to something you said about the jargon and everything, I really did appreciate that you had that conversational style because I took a class in addiction memoir in undergrad and a lot of it like they would use like the actual like scientific terminology for the drug or for they would say like the what's going on in the body and they would use this like very complex term and then you sit there and you have to google it and you have to be like, well, what does that even mean? So I did really appreciate that it was readable because accessibility is number one when you're telling a story like your story of making sure that you're including everybody and inspiring other people to, hey, if you're in this position, you can do it because I did it too.
Yeah.
um And you mentioned comics too. What kind of comics did you read?
Oh, man, X-Men or Power Rangers, you know. I was Marvel before Marvel was as big as it is now.
I
Uh,
love that. Yeah. I
Buffy the
think that's,
Vampire Slayer. Buffy
yeah,
the Vampire Slayer was the big one.
I think there's a lot of parallels between like X-Men and Marvel was, totally a metaphor for queerness and otherness in general. So I think it was a very it was a safe place for kids to go who felt like they had, differences in that regard. Growing up, you see that okay, their differences give them superpowers and let them, do things that other kids can't do. So maybe what I have is a superpower. So definitely that's an amazing, it makes a lot of sense. X-Men is fantastic. And I think you mentioned Power Rangers a couple times in the book as well. Did you ever have any crossover in the performing world with that? And then we'll go to Nat.
Let's see. So I was never on Power Rangers, the TV show. I did meet a bunch of them. I'm friends with some of them now, so that was cool. Um, yeah, no, that's maybe one day I'll still be on there. Maybe I'll get to play a villain or something, but we'll see.
That would be amazing to see. Are they doing any current runs of the TV show at this point
Oh,
or
yeah, it's been on since the beginning. It's
oh my
been different
gosh.
iterations, different
Yeah.
costumes, different
We'll
cats.
get you on there. We'll
Yeah,
we'll make it happen.
good, good,
Nat has a question.
great.
Yeah. Real quick though, too, with the Marvel and the superheroes, X-Men. I took a superhero class at Harvard, and I learned that X-Men is actually an allegory for people with disabilities and LGBTQ. So kind of makes sense that you draw some inspiration from that. But my question is, you mentioned somewhere in the book that you thought about making this a fiction, but then you ended up going full on memoir, which I commend you for because it is really scary to not be able to hide behind fictional characters. Although I know you changed their names to like save grace. But if it would have been fiction, do you think it would have been written in the same conversational style, or do you think you would have done something different?
That's a good question. I think maybe I would have changed things. Like, you know how we want to go back in our past, we want to change our past. Like maybe the character would have ended up with Liam, maybe, certain people wouldn't have died. I mean, but I think you can't, when you're telling a story like this and you've gone through something like I've gone through, like you have to tell the truth because people want to hear the truth and they want to know that like, okay, this really happened to him and he's really okay now. He's like doing more things than like he ever thought possible because of sobriety and things like that. So it was important to tell the truth, and it was important to change most of the names. But one of them was a rock star who probably would have sued me if if, it came out. But I didn't really want to out him, you know, either. So there was that. And I found out it's called a roman à clef, or I think is the name of it, where it's like a memoir, but it's just all the names are changed. So a type of book. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's
That
that's
is super
definitely,
cool.
yeah. Having there is, it's brave to put your story out there, but I think it's also really important to, the people reading it, because there's something to based on a true story, those words on the cover of a book, or this is a true story, that gives it that gravity that an otherwise fiction story might not have, because the characters might end up with a happy ending, but is it really as impressive if they're not real and they didn't earn it and they didn't go through the trials that you did in real life? So I think that's definitely I think it was a good move, because I saw in the end, you wanted to end up with the rock star, maybe you were toying with that idea, and maybe, going back to LA and all these different things. But I think the way that your story ended up was the better story to tell. And I hope you feel that way too, having lived it.
Yeah, I do. And I think that like the best part of this book and like the truth of it was that after it was published and after Justin Bieber was spotted with a copy of it on Sunset Boulevard, paparazzi took photos. People download, like I think it was 3,000 people downloaded it from Amazon overnight, and then many people bought it. And so I got a lot of emails from people who said, thank you for writing this because it helped me quit drinking, or it helped me better understand my uncle who's a drunk, or something. And then I got some emails from like high school, I wouldn't say friends, high school like acquaintances. They weren't necessarily nice to me. Of course, they love me now, which is great. I think that's what happens when you grow up and you become an adult. Things change. But I got some emails from them saying that, like this really inspired them. One of them quit drinking. They were sober for like a year at the time they emailed me after reading the book. So it really made a difference. And as long as if it changed one person's life, that's what it was written for. But if it changed many people's lives, that's even better.
And that's interesting that you bring that up, because that's something that a lot of people talk about when they talk about, fame and how it changes lives. Those people who might not have been so nice in high school come back and they're looking for, oh, hey, we were friends all along. Where's my piece of that? Did you experience that? And if so, how did your recent sobriety and your spirituality that you came into, how did that influence how you saw people like that?
I think it really, after going through something like that, and like I talk about the ego a lot, and like there's a certain ego that like disappeared from me, where I became more like open-minded to everybody, and loving people and seeing people for who they were, coming from having money and then going to New York to LA, and I thought I was somebody. And I'm so glad I grew up from that. And because when you see people for who they are, you get an opportunity to really make some great friends. You can make some great enemies too. We've been dealing with that as a student leader. But it's really, it changed who I was. And yeah, I'm really happy that I can like see people now. So for them, to like the high school friends, like we're friends now. The head cheerleader and the jock, the football guy. Like we're actually friends. I went back to Texas 2 years ago for like a little reunion, and we actually hung out. And one of them came up to me and hugged me crying. She's like, I read all your books and I just think it's amazing what you're doing, and I'm so inspired. And that's what matters. Like that people can grow and change. It was nice to see. And I think I went back there very scared that those people would be the same way and that I would feel the same way. But it wasn't like that at all.
That's really beautiful. So much has changed since, that point in time, right? I mean, as I was reading it, you were listing out the years, and I was like, oh man, I remember what it was like to live through these specific years, especially, I can't imagine. I live in New Jersey. We're, pretty progressive over here. There were a couple shout outs to New Jersey who were like, New Jersey sucks in the book. I was like, oh, come on.
Again, it's been a while since I wrote this book. Many things have changed. I'm a college student now. I love everybody. I love everywhere.
No, I'm just kidding. We are the armpit of America. I totally get it. But we're relatively progressive over here. We're right next to New York. There's just, a lot of culture here. I know in Texas it was probably not like that. Everyone I know who's from Texas, especially people who grew up queer, know that it's a very difficult place to grow up anything other than the, textbook cookie cutter backgrounds. So especially in those years, how much has changed just with, in regards to gay rights, how much has changed in regards to, the culture at large of, society and fame. I think it's just a very interesting piece because of when it happened. Can you kind of speak to how everything has changed? What would it be like to go through those same experiences, even a decade later, even such a short amount of time as a decade later? And how do you think that influenced everything that you experienced?
Yeah, I think growing up in Texas was tough. I was in the closet for a long time. I was in the closet until I graduated high school. Some friends knew. I mean, everybody could tell. I was not very um butch at that time, but I was a choir boy. I was the show choir student leader. I was the first guy to ever try out for cheerleader at my high school. So, but I dated girls and stuff. And I think it was, the attack that happened where I almost died by 3 high school boys, and then my mom died. And um, I just felt like I couldn't be myself in Texas. And so I moved to New York pretty much immediately. When I went back for this reunion a couple years ago, I didn't feel unsafe. I didn't feel looked at differently, like when I went back to downtown Fort Worth, um, which was nice. But I know there's still so much. I'm sure like it's better. It's 100 times better because there's characters on TV now. There's shows. There's everywhere. There's queer characters, right? There's drag queens everywhere, which I love. We're having one at the Affinity graduation Tuesday. I'm very excited for their performance. Yeah, so I think growing up now it's a little better, but I would say a little better. Texas is still Texas.
That's very
It's
well
not
put.
Florida. It's not Florida.
Yeah, not Florida, right? Any Floridians in the chat?
Sorry. I'm offending in
All
Jersey.
love, all love.
Yeah.
um, so with that in mind, in terms of the landscape of fame, how do you think that has changed over the years as well, with the dawn of social media influencers and TikTok and the short form content that is really dominating everything? I mean, do you think that your incredible story of, rubbing elbows with all of these huge big name people, could that have happened, now, or were you just the perfect place at the perfect time?
Yeah, I mean, MySpace wasn't like the fodder that like whatever TikTok and Instagram are now for like these gossip magazines or whatever. Like when I met Brittany that first time at her restaurant in New York, and we took the picture together, and like she loved the picture I gave her of me in drag. And um I put it on my Angel Fire website. Now we're dating ourselves. And somebody found it and they said, can we put this in the National Enquirer? Can we put this in the UK's Heat magazine, which is sort of like the Enquirer over there? But yeah, if social media had been as like wild as it is now, like that would have been a huge story. Yeah, it made global headlines because it went to the Enquirer and the UK's Heat magazine. But I mean, that would have been a huge story. I mean, it still ended up being a big story. Like Britney Spears, I think it was called the World of Britney.com, was like the biggest website at the time. They came and interviewed me, and yeah, it was still a great thing. But yeah, I think my career definitely would be in a different place right now had social media been as active as it is now.
And in the chat, it looks like Danielle found the Angel Fire page, so it still exists.
Yeah, it's still there, and I still look at it sometimes. I have no idea how to edit it, but yeah, maybe Danielle, you can help me retrieve some old photos from it one of these days. But yeah.
There are some other questions in the chat. So Gustavo wanted to know what authors and writers do you look to for inspiration when writing your book or writing any future books? Because I know that you've been now through the program. I mean, how has your list of writers that you draw inspiration from, how has that changed since you've started the program here at HES?
Say that like I'm not a big reader, which I think is odd because I've written, 2 memoirs and 2 children's books. Um, I get a lot of my inspiration from like TV and movies, and that I'm more like this a visual kind of learner, I guess you could say. And so when I see something on Euphoria, for example, like I'm thinking, all right, how am I going to put those into words and make that same scene pop for my readers? Um, I think like because I'm now graduating Harvard and I have taken 3 expo classes, as they call them here, expository writing. um, I I think that the next book, the book about Harvard that I'll be working on this summer, will be still in my conversational tone, but the commas might be in the right places and the exclamation points less, but we'll see.
No, that's great. I think it's always really interesting you brought up the children's books. It's so funny because the people I know who write children's books, the content that they write for adults is always so like extreme. Like you've got, in your memoir that we're talking about, you've got those very explicit intimate scenes. You've got like obviously like drugs and partying, and then you write children's books, and it's so interesting that it's always those types of people. And by those types of people, I am also speaking about myself. I do also write children's content, but my primary adult content is typically like body horror and exploring, eating disorders and body dysmorphia. So what do you think drew you to children's books after having written about that in your memoir?
Yeah, maybe it's the way to like cleanse ourselves a little bit and bring back our childhood aura after writing all that dirty stuff. I think actually for me, my 2 children's books are about gender curiosity. And so it's also basically a memoir of my childhood, and like, my mom um letting me put on a wig for Halloween one year and dressing up in one of her nurse's outfits. And it's about just unconditional love. And I wanted to do 2 versions where it was a little girl who wanted to dress as a fireman and a boy who wanted to dress as a nurse. And so they are like mini memoirs without the cuss words and the drugs. And they're for kids to sort of just have. One of my best friends from Texas, she has a child who is very gender curious, has been saying that they were a boy since they could talk. And so when she read them that book, it was they saw a character that looked like them, that acted like them, and it was just, that was the touching moment for me. I think that's what it's all about, right? That's why we write, is to like touch somebody and really like make their life better in some way.
Absolutely. It's about finding what's needed out in the world and trying to fill that as much as possible. And I think you've definitely done that. And it sounds like in your children's pieces, you've done that as well, because we do need more children's literature about, just exploring what it is to be a person who lives in a body. So many people don't want to go there. So I definitely do appreciate that.
I think too, if there was a character like the ones that I did when I was younger, I don't think I would have felt so alienated and alone. And I think maybe that's why people write children's books too, is like, we want the kids of this generation to have something we didn't have and learn some lessons that we wish we could have learned. And then
Where can where can we find those children's books? Are they
Amazon, Target,
okay.
Walmart, I don't know. They're all over. They're all over the place. Um, Callie says, tell us a little bit about your writing routine. So actually, I'm glad you brought this up because I wanted to bring it up. So this book I wrote in 3 months. It's 404 pages. I wrote it on the 4 train going from the Bronx to downtown Manhattan every day. It was a 45-minute ride each way. And I wrote it on my notes app on my phone. So the whole book was written on my notes app. And I think part of it is finding the time, because like we're always like, oh, we don't have time. I don't have time to do this. Well, instead of playing Candy Crush on the train, write a book. It's that simple. Yeah, so that's how I wrote the first one. And then the second one, I sort of wrote in a similar way. I don't know. I think it's easier for me to write on my phone than to write on my computer.
Yeah, that definitely comes back to that accessibility again, because you're busy, you're acting, you're obviously like you're booked and busy, you got things going on. So that in between downtime is when you are writing. And I think that holds true for a lot of writers, because for a lot of us, writing isn't necessarily our primary uh bread maker in our lives. I think we get like 30 cents for each published work that's
Yep.
purchased.
She's not wrong. She's not wrong about that.
So it always ends up kind of being a back burner kind of thing that gets done in between. But putting in the work is necessary, and it's doable. And I think that it would be cool if you wrote about your writing process and about how you are so busy and you've got this linear space where you're thinking about things and you're putting your thoughts into your notes app as it is. I write in my notes app all the time. That's one of my own processes as well. So that that touches close to home. Nat wants to know if you plan on pitching this book as a movie. How do you feel about that?
Well, if you know anybody, Nat, I'm ready. I'm ready to pitch it. I'll play the older version of myself. Timothy Chalamet will play the younger version of me, clearly. Yeah, no, I actually took a class here at Harvard called Writing the 1 Hour TV Pilot. And so there is a pilot episode written for this book that would turn into like a limited series or something on, HBO Max or Netflix or something. Yeah, Ricky Lake plays a big part in it. So
you mentioned Euphoria before as one of your TV show kind of inspirations that you like to go to visually. Are there other TV shows that you might put the limited series, if it does, when it does end up being created? I'm manifesting for us.
thank you.
What would you put your series next to in the Netflix queue? Like what would you want it to look like?
Yeah, I think it would probably be close to Euphoria in that sense, but with a little bit of like Friends mixed in. I don't know, because there's some funny stuff in my life too. Like I don't want it to be all dramatic, but because there, you have to find the joy in life too. So yeah, maybe a little Euphoria, a little Friends, but the script that I wrote is that like it would be current day where Ricky Lake is interviewing me about my life. She was the first TV show I was on when I was younger, so having her part of it would be flashbacks and yeah, and some raunchy scenes.
Well, let's see who we can get in touch with here at Harvard to make this happen. So Gustavo wants to know, in that vein, how has screenwriting and your experience in acting as an actor influenced your vision as a writer?
Yeah, I think being on set and watching how like, TV shows are made, movies are made, it's so interesting, because you really get to see behind the scenes, right? And I think about how like when I'm writing a book, I have to like take myself outside of it. So it's like when I'm watching a TV show, especially one that I've been on, and I can remember like what was on the craft services table that day, and it wasn't very good. I'm like, you have millions of dollars and you're giving us this for lunch. But I have to like take myself out of that moment and watch the show as it is and dive into it. So that's what I sort of do with my writing, is like when I'm writing a memoir, I tried like giving myself a different name helped, because there's some like really tough stuff in this book. And when I wrote it, I had to like relive it multiple times. And every time I reread it, I have to relive it. And so sort of giving myself Caleb, the name Caleb, I could sort of put him as this character who was living it. So it wasn't as hard to write, because for that moment when I was writing, it wasn't me, it was Caleb who went through all this stuff. So it's a good reason, I guess.
Yeah, you're providing that psychic distance that's necessary to tell the story, but you're also kind of using the lens as an actor to, you know, be that other character, because that's not you anymore. Like you're separating to keep yourself safe, and you're so that makes a lot of sense. Because I was wondering how in any of your writing, acting in general and being a performer extending beyond acting, because that's the number one thing I got from your book and from seeing everything, is that your action verb would be perform. That's Kody in a nutshell. How
All
how
day,
does
every day. Life is a stage, as they say.
yes
Um,
how does that inform your writing process? Like, do you get into a character? Like, how does that work?
yeah, that's a really interesting question too. I think when I'm writing, I'm just like, I don't know. I zone in. I feel like I've been kind of like, especially when I'm writing on my phone and I'm on the train and I'm just like zoned in. So maybe people think I'm like really into like, I don't know, Candy Crush or something. But I feel like it's sort of like a blinder goes on. So I just become this like horse that's like a racehorse who's just, I'm going to get these words down. So maybe I don't become a person. I become my spirit animal, racehorse and Britney Spears. They enter enter my mind when I'm writing. Yeah, but being as a performer, and scripts and all that stuff, I think it helped me, because I started doing background acting when I was writing this book, and I started doing some stage shows, and in the footnotes, in the little action parts of the scripts and stuff, there's these descriptors, and I think that's helped me, because I think when the first draft of this book, Tom, who's like a father figure to me, who wrote the foreword, and he's coming for graduation, I think, which is exciting. He said, like, I don't see some of the stuff you're saying. Like, you went to this restaurant and you ate food. Like, well, I don't know that restaurant like you do, right? So tell me as the reader that restaurant. So when I described Paisanos, it was the floor to ceiling wood panels with the dripping lanterns and wine bottles. And like, I was like, okay, right. So I think you have to step back and read the book as somebody else too. Because otherwise, if you're reading it as you're like, oh yeah, Paisanos on Mulberry Street. Everybody knows that. No, you need to like take a step back, obviously have a billion people read it, but then you need to just give it a minute, come back and read it as if you're someone else reading it. That's really helpful.
That's a good point. I think a lot of the books on writing that I have read, Stephen King, Francine Prose, John Franklin, they all say, if you love it, put it down for like a month and don't look at it, and then come back later and then fill in the rest of the details that no longer make sense because it's not fresh anymore. So absolutely. And I'm sure with memoir, especially, you're sitting there thinking in your mind, oh, everybody knows this detail, everybody knows this person. Like, we've all seen this person. She's a staple of the community, but people reading it across the world might not know. So that's absolutely a challenge with memoir.
I mean, luckily, I only hang out with the top celebrities in the world: Britney Spears, Justin Bieber, Tommy Lee. People know. I don't have to do a lot of research on them to name drop. Actually, Dennis Rodman is in the second book as well. Yeah.
All right. Well,
And
you're
Supreme Court
really making
Justice Sotomayor. I don't know if you all noticed, but on the back of my book, there is a message from Supreme Court Justice Sotomayor. It says, Kody Christiansen, I admire your courage. So I was working in a restaurant called Perigo. I talk about it a little bit in this book. One day, and she came in with her friend and the Secret Service, and I got to serve them. And so, everybody, y'all know me. I'm like, hey, Supreme Court Justice, and shaking hands, wheeling and dealing, putting on the smile. And so we got to talking, and at the end, when I gave her bill, I also gave her a copy of my book. And I said, I'd like to, thank you for being one of the justices who voted to legalize gay marriage around the country. Because I may not have anybody right now, but, because of you, one day I could get married if I wanted to. And so I gave her the book, and she's like, thank you. And 2 weeks later, I see this package on the bar, and it says from the Supreme Court of the United States. I'm like, oh shit, they found me. They found me. I'm like, oh my God. But it said Office of Sotomayor. So I opened up the package, and it was a copy of her memoir. So she read my book, and then she felt so touched that she sent me her book, and inside it said, Kody Christiansen, I admire your courage, Sonia. So that was pretty cool.
That's so beautiful. And especially how much, I mean, you touch upon it just a little bit, but you were, at Stonewall, like there was so much gay history, queer history in the places that you occupied in New York and in LA. It's really beautiful to see that real world connection is touching on, your book and everything. So I think that's really beautiful that you made that connection. Callie wants to know that have you been drafting your experiences at Harvard, or are you just gonna put it on a page straight from memory? Like what's your process right now, having been through the program?
Well, luckily there's email trails that I will be forwarding to my new email address. Danielle's laughing because she knows exactly what I'm talking about. Luckily, my name has been in the Harvard Crimson more times than any other Harvard Extension student ever. So I've got some paper trails there as well. But one thing I was doing, especially for my first two books, I was making a daily post on Facebook so that I actually could go back, and there's a company called My Social Book that will take all your posts from your Facebook and make a book. And so when I have some of those from my first year at Harvard, my 2 years at NYU. This year has been so insane with being the student government president at the Harvard Extension School that, and then all the other things that I'm doing. It's called My Social Book, Gustavo. So I haven't been doing my daily post, but I think the things that I'm going to write about, also, as Danielle knows, I won't need to have things written down. They were all very memorable. The things that'll be in this next book. I mean, I think a lot of you, all of you who are students here, know some of the stuff we're talking about. So, yeah.
I'm very excited for that one to come out then.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to definitely change some names on this book, because I'm sure Harvard is quick with the suing. Oh man.
Yeah. Well, just change all the names and it'll be fine.
Yeah. Yes.
So speaking of changing the names and everything, how did you kind of navigate allusions to certain celebrities who people might guess who they were just based on where they live and their behavior and things like that? I mean, is the only difference the names, or did you change any of the mannerisms or anything like that to protect identity? I mean, how did you navigate that and avoid getting in trouble in that way?
Yeah, I think the people who are in the book, the people who are with me in Los Angeles, and they know who the person is, obviously, because they saw us together all the time. I don't think Liam's real life character won a Grammy. He definitely won a couple of MTV awards, but but yeah, I just wanted to make sure that like people who knew, but people who didn't wouldn't, because even though like, he hurt me really bad, it's not my place to like out somebody or whatever. But if you want to call me later after this is over, I'll tell you exactly who it was. I always I always tell my friends, I'm like, if you read the whole book, I'll tell you who the rock star was.
All right, well, I read the whole book.
All right, then we'll talk. We'll talk.
So I know you just brought up how bad he hurt you, and it was very clear throughout the book that was a frequent motif, like just when you were like, okay, that we'll say the character Caleb is getting over this relationship and is moving on to a cute new Italian guy or someone, it comes back, that wave of pain and emotion comes back, and you remember the rock star. How did you deal with writing about such intense emotions that lasted over such a long period of time? Like, how did you go through and write a coherent piece that didn't just say, I hate him, like.
Um, I don't know. I think when I got sober, I sort of dealt with everything. Like in the first couple of months, I realized that like my addictions, my alcoholism stemmed from me never really dealing with the emotional trauma of losing my mother and getting gay bashed and all the just crazy things that happened to me. And then like with him, so I just sat with myself for a while after getting sober, and sorry, my little bird is going crazy. I just sat with myself and really thought about everything. And like, would my mom be proud of me right now in this homeless shelter smoking crack? No. And this is not the life she wanted for me. This is not the life that I was meant to live. And so there was some brief moments when I was sober. I was like, this is it. This is what I need to do. And then when I got completely sober, and I haven't looked back, we're almost 8 years now. June 29th will be my 8th year of sobriety. Thank you so much. I never looked back, and I just look forward. So yeah. Oh, I'm a nature lover. I can't help it. Found this little bird today, so I'm getting him back to health. He's getting there. He's already jumping around. Yeah, so this book was very cathartic for me, and I think that's another reason to write a memoir. Even if you're not going to publish it, I think just write it, get it out. It's very cathartic.
So it was kind of like a therapeutic process, like as you were, getting into sobriety and everything, it was just sort of, it helped to grapple with all of the things that had happened in the prior few years. And it was just, I think a lot of writers feel that writing memoir is very cathartic, just because it is, it's a diary, except you're letting the whole world read it.
Yeah,
It's a huge difference.
which is scary. But I think even though my goal was to publish it, and I didn't know how I was going to do it, but that the second I wrote that last word, it was like a literal weight was lifted off me. I could feel this dark cloud released from my chest. I felt lighter, and it was really a beautiful moment. And then, like I said, I haven't looked back since then, and graduating from Harvard and next week. And, 8 years ago, I was in a homeless shelter. So anything's possible. Thank you, Danielle, with all A's. That was correct. Yeah. What else we got?
So there's a couple of other questions about the publishing process. So we wanted to go into that. I know you were talking about self-publishing. I know you were talking about, publishing via a publishing house. What was your experience with that? And I know it was kind of a winding journey, but can you just go into detail about all of that? Because I know a lot of the writers are very curious.
Yeah, so I initially found a place called McNally Jackson, which is a bookstore in New York, and they had one of those espresso book machines. And so it was one of those where you could print your book just like right there, anywhere. And they actually had a person that would help like put, format it and stuff. So that was really helpful. So I worked with this gentleman who was formatting the book. And then they published it and they put it on their shelves. And then I asked him if I could have the digital copy for myself. And so I could put it on Amazon. So I first put it on Amazon, which is great. People can buy your books on there. And you get some money from it. But if you want to put it on shelves, you have to get it in a distributor that will sell it at 50% off so that booksellers can sell it for their 50+ percent. So I went and I found Ingram Spark. Ingram is like the largest book distributor in the world, and they have their own self-published company now called Ingram Spark. And once I got my book in there, and there's a box you tick that says author discount or a retailer discount. And once that's available, you can actually go into like your local bookstores and say, hey, could you purchase my book, put it on the shelf? That's how I got it on the shelves of Barnes and Noble. And Ingram Spark actually asked me to write a whole article about that. And now I think Barnes and Noble probably had it taken down because so many people are probably asking them to put their books on the shelf. But like my book is at the Harvard Coop, which is amazing. Two of the best things that happened were three, actually. I got my book into the Los Angeles public library system, the New York public library system, and then just a couple of weeks ago, it's now part of the Harvard College Library collection. So yeah, it's all about
Amazing.
It's all about asking, finding your allies at these places and just asking them.
Being a self-advocate, because that's what we all have to do as writers, because nobody else is going to advocate for our work. So we've got to do it ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I think that's really interesting. I did not know about this espresso machine. I think that's really cool. In terms of formatting, so somebody was just there putting it on the page. Like, was it kind of like a printing press situation where they like lined up all of the text and then, got it ready like per page, or like, how did that look?
Luckily, this was the book was published in 2016, so it's a little more technologically advanced than the printing press. I'm also not that old. Thanks so much. And no, they had a computer system. I think they used Adobe. What is it, Danielle? What's the one that you do books with? Adobe something. One of the Adobe products that you make books with, and yeah. So basically, I gave them a Word document, and he just went for it. We picked out the fonts, and then a couple $100, and my book was ready to go. And also, I want to say one other advice. There's a website called Design Crowd. Both my book covers were basically you give the Design Crowd like some images, some ideas, and then people like compete to get your money. So you get all these like cool like sample covers, and oh my God, he just shoved in my face. Oh, okay. Yeah, so you get these amazing covers, and it's a good time. Yeah, I definitely suggest Design Crowd.
All right. Well,
I'm gonna put him over here.
I was gonna say get the little bird under wraps.
Yeah.
Versace.
Oh, Versace. All right, he's gonna play over there for a little while. All right.
So in terms of the formatting, you had someone do that for you. would there be anything that you would change in future books? Would you want to format it yourself or have more
Oh,
control over
absolutely
it?
not. Absolutely. I don't, I do not need to learn how to use Adobe, whatever it's called. And no, I leave the pros, let the pros handle the formatting. Um, I think being a self-published author, you already have so much control. Like if you want to learn InDesign, that's the name of it. I just remembered. Yep. And if you want to learn InDesign, great, you go for it. But that's not part of my process. I just want to write it and give it to somebody.
That's
Uh,
easy. You're easy. There you go.
Natalie says, tell us about the sequel, a little teaser. Oh, wow. I don't know. Should I? Yeah. So it is actually the story of when I went back to LA for the first time after a year of sobriety. And so I went back to do a book signing, and the bookstore that it was at was right between one of the bars I used to get drunk and high at and one of the other bars I used to get drunk and high at on Sunset Boulevard. And so it was my like personal journey to go back to those places and see those people and, you know, go into the bars, into that bathroom that I was in with Liam, and like come out sober and not be, it was like, I guess, me testing myself. Like, okay, you've been sober a year, but are you really strong enough to like go back to LA? Yeah, and I'm here, you know. So clearly there's a happy ending to that story too. Um, but yeah, and then like I ended up buying Justin Bieber his meal at Subway sandwich when his credit card got declined. That's in the book. It's also all over the internet. Just type in Kody Christiansen, Justin Bieber. Um, yeah, and there's some other good stories. I did run into Liam again, so there's some, I wouldn't say closure, but there's definitely some continuation of that story. Yes, it's a lot. It's literally 1 week in LA, so there's like 7 chapters for the 7 days, and then a chapter here and there on the other side. So it's about half the size of this book. Um, but it's a real like it's more uplifting. I mean, not uplifting. It's more because I'm not doing drugs. There wasn't like a ton of like dramatic, like, you know, getting beat up by crack dealers. There's none of that. So uh, the drama in that book comes from just like really testing myself with my limits of sobriety, and then inspiring my friends who I met with. So yeah, it's a good one. Multiple celebrities in that one. Check it out.
We'll post links for that one in a bit. Aaron wants to know, how much of your first book did you have written before you told anybody you were writing a book? Like, were you telling everybody, hey, I'm writing a book about my life, or were you kind of keeping it to yourself as more of that, like you said, cathartic experience? And did anyone suggest that you wouldn't finish? He says he's curious about what types of adversity/obstacles you dealt with while trying to finish the book.
I think there was a couple of people I reached out to say, hey, I'm writing about our story, like part of, you know, you're in my story, and I'm going to change the names, but I just want to let you know that it's going to be out there. I didn't get a lot of pushback on that from some of the people that I actually like wanted to give the heads up to. I think at the time I was writing it, I think I finished it when I was like 6 months sober. And at that point, people weren't worried about if I was going to finish a book. They were worried about if I was going to go back to being a drunk drug addict. It wasn't until maybe like a year and a half sober, maybe 2 years, finally, that the people closest to me were like, okay, wow, like he's never going back to that. Because, you know, the people, Tim in the book, like, you know, there's Lacey, you know, in the book, like the real people knew me. They knew bad Caleb. They saw firsthand, you know. So for them, and then I think with a lot of addicts and alcoholics, there's always like, I'm gonna I'm gonna get sober, I promise. After this, just give me $20 more and then I'll get sober tomorrow. And there was like a couple of times where I was spent 30 days sober in Los Angeles on a court order. and uh and then, you know, I just went back to it. And I think really it just comes down to me not having dealt with all the stuff that I had been through emotionally. But yeah.
Yeah. And that's I mean, such a powerful thing for a lot of people, because I think most people have at least one loved one who's going through something, or, you know, have a similar experience. And I think it's really powerful to see how you've overcome everything when there were so many obstacles and so many blockades. So I I was really inspired reading it, because, you know, so many people were not super nice to you throughout, but I think you overcame a lot. Do you ever feel like there are any emotional blockades between yourself and writing about things like that? I mean, were there any moments that you left out that you absolutely could not bring yourself to write about, or are you kind of all cards on the table, you just want to get it out?
Yeah, I pretty much all cards on the table. I mean, if you're gonna write a book about your life where you know, talk about some really crazy things, you might as well just go all the way. Um, and I think too, I always tell people, like, if I run for office one day, what are they gonna dig up? I've literally written the book about it. You know, there's nothing to find on me because it's all in here. And then the next one, and then the one that's coming after that. Just wait. Oh man, y'all, this Harvard one is gonna be insanity. Plot twist at the end. Oh, what, you know, and I can laugh about it now, but like some like people really close to me at this school like really stabbed me in the back at the end, and it hurt. But like while I was hurting, I was still thinking, man, this is gonna make a great chapter in the book. That bitch is so twisted. Yeah, and there's heroes and there's villains in this book. There's definitely some heroes and villains in this book. I don't know if y'all know Professor Graham Bird, but I told him he's going to be a hero in this book. Yeah, we love Graham Bird.
So in the end of the book, of your first book, you talked about wanting to go to NYU and your journey with that. What made you switch to Harvard, and what was the story with that? Is that another thing that I'll have to read about in the sequel?
Um, no, the sequel, I hadn't gotten into NYU yet. I actually didn't get into NYU until 2018, so a year or two after the second book. Yeah, so NYU, it was an amazing experience. Even as a non-traditional student, like I didn't feel as alienated as I do here sometimes at Harvard. I know, you know, being a distant student or being like online or just being an older student on campus, there's a lot of like naysayers and yada yada. But NYU, it was very liberal, very free. Like I felt like really free to be myself there. And I mean, I do here as well, which is great. Like Harvard for last year's Gay Pride put me on their Instagram, which is really cool, and all their social media. But NYU, I graduated in 2020, which was, of course, like the pandemic had just started raging on, and I got accepted so I graduated from NYU School of Professional Studies, which is like their extension sort of thing there. And then I got accepted to NYU Tisch to finish my bachelor's, but it was like $46,000 a semester. And at the time, like my credit wasn't very good, and I just like it wasn't possible. And so I also applied for Harvard College, and I didn't get in. I found out later that my SAT math score, I got a 99 percentile on the writing, thank you, at 30 something years old, and before taking any English classes at Harvard. But then I didn't do well on the math. I got like a 50 percentile or something. And I found out from one of the admissions people later that it was like, yeah, if you had just waited the year and a year later, when they didn't need the SATs, you probably would have got in. I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. But I went to, I knew that summer, because I was living in my apartment on my own in the Bronx, no pets, nothing, no friends nearby. I was like, if I don't continue doing classes, I'm going to go insane. So I continued at Harvard and then moved here to Cambridge that fall of 2020, stayed in a bed and breakfast for a while, and became a degree candidate, and then the rest is history. Student body president, all that good stuff. Creator of societies.
And we thank you for that every day, endlessly.
Good.
Somebody asked, how do subsequent ongoing printings work now that the books have wider circulation? So now that everybody's already seen a copy, are you going to are there, I think I have the second edition, so how did that work, and
Yeah.
what happened there?
So the second edition, I added the photo section, which everybody's seen the photo section. And then I added a couple of things, like when I shaved my head in one of the shelters in a very like Britney way after my grandmother died. I mean, I don't think I hadn't put that in the first edition. And then there were some other stories from LA that I kind of sprinkled in because I wanted to tell a fuller story, because like once it was out there and like I was like, you know what, let's just go all the way and like make this really complete. And so yeah, so the second book, and then Ingram Spark is the best. Like it's print on demand, so I don't have to worry about printing. I don't have to like have a stock at my apartment or my dorm room or anything. So I would say yes, oh yeah, Danielle, yours says first edition, but it has a photo section. Yeah, because I didn't change that part. I didn't change where it says first edition on the first page. Yeah. So you have the first edition of the second edition. And I think in the first printing, there was like the guy who formatted it put like a website link on one of the pages. So if you get like I guess he accidentally copied and pasted into like the text, like a link to some random website. Thankfully, it wasn't a porn website, but it was like just random website in the middle of the text. And so that was some of like the first copies that went out to like my friends in Texas, and people who were buying them from this bookstore have this random link in it. So when I'm super famous in a couple of years, if you have one of those random link website, it's going to be like the Princess Di Beanie Baby. It's going to be worth a ton for a couple of years. And then worth nothing 10, 20 years later.
Does anyone have the copy with the link? Because I want to know what the link goes to. I'm curious now. Because I don't think mine does. I didn't see any strings.
You can only get those. I think somebody is selling a signed copy on eBay for like $100 or something. I have no idea who this is. It's not me. I wish it was. But I think that one is one with the link in it. And I think I have like a couple at my house that have the link in it. But yeah, signed copy, $199.99. My Happy Book is the name, but yeah, it actually has like the sticker version of my 5-star review from Reader's Favorite on there, the actual sticker version. And that's a keeper.
Now that you brought that up, can you talk about that and how you got, the Reader's Favorite award and everything, and how that worked, and when you found out what it felt like to know that you were an award-winning author?
It felt like another Thursday to me. No, just kidding. That was my first reader's favorite award, like getting to go to Miami, Florida, which look, Miami is nice. Let's just whatever backwards politics, I don't care. My South Beach, Florida, beautiful. Okay. Went there to accept this award, but and it was the most amazing night. I had just been I think I'd been sober a year at that point, and to go accept a medal for a book you wrote about like your life there was no better moment up until that point. Yeah, it was so good. But how it works, I found readers favorite through searching. I think maybe I saw their stickers on somebody's book and I was like, oh, what's that? So yeah, if you want to get your book read and reviewed, reader's favorite is a great place to get it done. It's not super expensive and their reviewers are great. And they don't sugarcoat it. Like both my books got 5 stars, but there's some books on that website that have not gotten 5 stars. So it's not like you pay for a review kind of thing. It's like if your book isn't trash, they'll tell you it's trash. So if you get an award from them, it's really meaningful. So,
yeah, thank you for talking about that, because I was curious because I had seen those awards on books before, but I hadn't looked into them. And I was like, all right, is this, one of those like you said, like is it a pay for award kind of thing? Or is it like, something like really serious and meaningful? And I looked it up right before this today. And I was, looking at the review actually that they did of your book. And I was like, oh yeah, she definitely read the book. And it was very, like thorough and meaningful and everything. So it's absolutely a great resource that I think our writers should take advantage of if possible. So thank you for sharing your experience with that.
of course.
Another question that I had for you was, because you were writing when some of the time you were, under the influence and some of the time you were sober, and, there were different stages of lucidity in your memories. So your memories might have been affected. Did you intentionally write with the unreliable narration in mind? Because the way that I read it initially, it was there were moments where Caleb was saying, how could the world do this to me? How could the world do this to me? And then at the end, the sobriety, spoiler alert if you guys didn't get to the end, but it was this moment of, oh my gosh, I'm doing this to myself, and I need to pull myself out of this. So I think that was very masterfully done, because it was showing that unreliable narrator, but also that unreliable thought process because of the inebriation. So can you speak to how you did that, and if you planned that out ahead of time, or if that was literally just the way your brain was going at the time?
Yeah, that's a really great way to point out it. I mean, it's like everything I wrote is true. And so when I was going through it, I really thought it was the world against me. And like I think a lot of addicts also deal with this too. It's like, oh, nobody wants to help me. Everybody wants to help you, but you're not helping yourself. You know what I mean? Oh my God, the world is against me. No, you're kind of against the world, my friend. Like you're going against the grain in the hardest way possible. And so, in the book, I talk about in the shelter one night watching this Texas evangelical, and like thought it was going to be some white noise that evening, but I really listened to this path that he talked about, and finding your divine plan. And the one where he talked about is like, I mean, I'm, like I said in the book, I'm spiritual. I'm not a Christian, Jewish, I'm Muslim, any faith. I'm more just like, everything is cool. But it was the 5th one, I think it was like, God will keep reminding you to get back on your path, because if you're not on your path, things like getting beat up by a crack dealer, or, getting evicted, are going to keep happening. And so when I heard that, I was like, wow, like I I really am doing most of this to myself. Like, I cannot blame this bottle, because yes, I was addicted to the actual, like, the liquid itself, but once I put it down, I and I was stepped away from it for 3 days to get, I went through withdrawals and sweats and everything. I looked at that bottle and I thought, wow, how did this keep so much power over me for so long? And then I don't know if I talk about it in the book, but I actually kept like an airplane sized bottle of vodka with me in my backpack every day for that first full year, just in case I needed it. And every time I even considered it, I would think, no, you don't need it. So it was like, I'm a kind of look the enemy in the eye kind of person. And so having that little bottle of vodka with me, and like, if I ever thought about it and be like, man, no, you're not that weak. It's there, but you're not going to be weak and you're not going to drink it. And I never did. And the year anniversary, I threw it away. So it's one of the tips. And the other tip I always think is like, just really visualize like your rock bottom, get it really like a strong picture in your head of it. And then remember that every time you think about drinking again or using, think about that time you don't want to go back to. For me, it was a pile of shit in a homeless shelter. So no spoiler alerts, but a pile of shit helped me get sober.
That I was going to ask you what, because you mentioned being very inspired by certain images and taking that and figuring out how to write that in the most impactful way. I wanted to ask you what your image was that you carried around that was the inspiration behind staying sober. So that makes a lot of sense, because that I remember that passage in the book and being like, ooh, that's bad. Like that's
Yeah, I mean, it was literally, I had just gone through like alcohol poisoning that night before. Alcohol poisoned myself for the 100,000th time, however many times. And then I got up to go to the bathroom, and it was at a YMCA. There was 45 different men on this floor. There was one bathroom that had 2 stalls and 1 urinal and 3 shower stalls. And somebody just didn't make it into the restroom that day. And they shit right on the floor in front of the door. And I literally looked down at that piece of shit on the floor and I thought to myself, man, Kody, your life is literally shit. Like, it is surrounded by it. Like, this is not your life. And so I think, as funny as it is to say that, like, that's the image I see in my head. And I kept that with me for especially the first year or two, because I never wanted to go back to that. I never wanted to go back to that. So that helped a lot.
Well, I think that's definitely a powerful image, to go with, because it's something that immediately takes you back to where you were, and thinking about it now, you're able to maintain that in your mind. And I think most of the individuals I know who have gone through their own sobriety journeys have a similar image that they go with. So I think it's a very interesting commonality that there's a picture that it brings you back to. Like, it's not necessarily like an event or words or anything like that. It's always a picture, and that's what you hold, and that's that stems that recovery. I wanted to ask, before we run out of time, we have about 15 minutes left. I wanted to talk about your drag, because that's something that kept coming up, and I think that's a bit of a happier note to end on. So I
Depends on
wanted
who
to
the
know.
audience is, I guess. It's a happier or not.
Well, I wanted to know about, Sarah Summers, Brittany Valentine. I wanted to know about your experiences with drag. What do you think of Drag Race? Like,
Y'all
how
aren't
do you
gonna
feel
like,
about all that?
y'all aren't gonna like this answer. I've only seen like 4 episodes of Drag Race in my life. Actually, RuPaul asked me to be on the second season, but at that time I wasn't ready. Obviously, I was not in a great place for that. but yeah, I actually just released, I did a student film for one of my Harvard classes, and it's called Death and Drag, Brittany Valentine, One Night in Boston. And I go into like how I started it, and you know, my mother's influence, and Brittany's influence, obviously. And then I'm really excited to be hosting the Lavender graduation next week. Um, you know, drag is beautiful and it's fun, and like it's meant to be fun, not, you know, I mean, all the stuff that's going on now, I talk about in the documentary too. Like, it's a scary place for like people who just want to get dressed up and entertain other people. Like, what is the problem with that? Like, I always like, if you don't want to see it, don't go, right? If you don't want your kids to see drag queens, then don't take your kids to see drag queens. But do not, like, you know, get in other people's way. I mean, but yeah, I think, you know, Brittany Valentine, sort of Sarah Summers, sort of saved me. Like, I was unknowingly devastated from like my mother's death, and when I started doing Brittany Valentine, was right around the time she passed. I went to this place called the Rose Room in Dallas, and I was performing, and then I got asked to be on the Ricky Lake show, the Tyra Banks show, and then like I did Miss Congeniality too, and I just really like, it was a beautiful distraction. Brittany became a beautiful distraction. So, you know, I owe her a lot. I owe her a lot for who I was. And then after a little while, I needed to find Kody again, because I had really lived, especially in New York, when I was the world's most famous Britney Spears impersonator, according to the National Enquirer and the UK's Heat magazine. I was Britney, Sarah, every night for a long time. So I needed to find Kody, and I think finding Kody was it was difficult, because I didn't know who I was anymore, because I had been Britney for so long. But now I found this like nice balance. Before I had a beard, there was a nice balance. It's a little harder to do Brittany Valentine these days. But yeah, I think finding the balance was, I'm just more balanced person. And I think like the best thing I can say is like, I'm in a place now where like not winning an award that I should have gotten from the community service organization that I've served for 3 years, if that is my biggest problem, I'm doing pretty good. So yeah, grateful. I think that's what it's all about, is gratitude. If you live in like if you realize what you have, like I'll tell you that first time I got out of my own bed again for the first time after the shelters was probably one of the best days of my life too, because I took everything for granted before, and it could happen to anybody so easily. You could become unhoused. So just be grateful. And I think living with gratitude is a great way to live.
I love that. That's beautiful. That's exactly what I was left with at the end of your book. I mean, all of it, there was so much. I was interested, and I was invested, and I was, you know, I wanted to know what came next. But at the end of your first book, when you found that gratitude, is when I was just, you know, it was just that very cathartic moment of like, yes, like this is not the ending, but this is the beginning of a happy ending. And I don't know, I was proud of you. You know, I got, you know, we spent 400 pages getting to know Caleb, and getting invested in this person who is you, and the ending was very, very uplifting. So I'm glad that you wrote it that way and didn't, you know, end it where you were in one of the shelters. and then the next book was, your uplifting, portion of it. So I think that was very well done. And I don't know. I was very emotional at the end. I was happy. So
that makes me very happy to hear. That means I touched you, and that's what it's all about.
does anyone have any last minute questions for Kody? Anything that maybe while you were reading you had a question about? Maybe not anything related to celebrity gossip or scandal, but something about Kody's writing at all. I mean, I have a couple other questions that I can throw in if nobody else has anything in the chat, because I am just curious. So I'll ask a question of my own. What classes have you taken at the extension school that are going to lend themselves to your writing? I know you mentioned XPOS, the dreaded XPOS. What else have you taken?
Beginning poetry. What was his name? He's great, really funny guy, but really inspiring. Let's see. I took photojournalism, surprisingly, was actually helped me a lot with my writing, but I got to do both of my passions. I got to take photographs and then I got to write about it. Our final project was a big photojournalism spread. And so that was great. I took the 1 hour TV pilot, which was amazing. Taught by two professionals who are working in Hollywood who had just sold like $1 million script while we were taking the class. So yeah, it's pretty good. The photojournalism class is taught by one of Obama's old White House photographers. So yeah, that was good. And then the Poetry in America courses. I got my minor in English because I took 4 Poetry in America courses, and they've started really. The new section leaders are like having people write poems on Yellow Dig and stuff. So it's that was a good one too. But yeah, I've been reading. I would say I'm not a reader, but man, I've read so much in the last 5 years of undergrad. Come on, I haven't read anything for fun. That's maybe what I meant to say, because I have been reading every day. I think last week was my last Harvard class ever. Well, maybe, unless I come back from my PhD. But yeah, I haven't read a damn thing since then. So some emails, but just enjoying this time.
So you've mentioned poetry a couple times now. Do you think that we might see a collection of poems in the future published by Kody Christiansen?
We might, because I do have some. This is actually the graduate review, which just came out a couple last week. It has one of my poems in it.
I like the shape.
Oh, When the Bells Call Out to You. It's about Harvard. Yeah. So yeah, I definitely have. There will definitely be, maybe in the back of the Harvard memoir, there'll just be a poetry section or something. We got a lot of stuff to talk about in that book.
That definitely sounds good.
Dean Bowman is going to be her name, or gotta come up with some names that are close, but not too close.
Just change one letter, you'll be fine. So is there anywhere that we can read your poetry now, or do you have a website of things that aren't necessarily published, but you did make them public?
Let's see, do I have another Angel Fire website? No, I did. I had to make CodyChristiansen.com for one of these Harvard assignments, but I don't think it's still active anymore. I would say follow me on Facebook, Instagram. Like, I post some stuff there. Yeah. Definitely, if I write a good poem, it's going to go on one of my social medias. So
So how far into the Harvard book are you, and when can we expect to see some advertisements for that?
Well, I'm living the finale, the final chapters of the book right now. So we'll see how this all plays out. But like I said, at the very end, there's been some plot twists, some characters who you thought were just gonna be angels turned out to be real devils. And then there were some devils who turned out to be, not angels, but they ended up helping a little more than I ever thought they would. So I got that person a plaque. Dean Bowman is getting a plaque at the Hessel Awards next Thursday. So yeah, that'll be in the book. I haven't started writing it yet. I have been taking some notes. But yeah, I have a lot of time this summer as I prepare to go to the other Cambridge in September.
And are you taking these notes on your notes app as well? Is this the same process?
Absolutely. I think this will be my third book written on the Notes app. Yeah.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I do the same thing. I think we all do. Does anybody have any other last minute questions?
Oh, Danielle, is that your hand up? No. It's like I always wanted to say that.
Danielle's like, I know everything. It's fine.
Can't we see
Oh,
Sarah Summers live? Next time I do Brittany/Sarah Summers, it will probably be for charity again. I did her in summer 2020 for charity. I raised $1,000 for the Alexandria House Women and Children's Shelter in LA, and did a music video to one of Brittany's songs. You can look it up. It's Alien by Brittany Valentine. And yeah, I think the next time I would do Sarah Brittany is either from a film project, a movie, TV show, or for charity. So we'll see. It's gonna be more than 1,000 this time. Now that I have Harvard alumni and Harvard student friends. So
well, that's amazing. Definitely getting those Harvard connections is going to help you get to that next step, whatever incredible thing it may be. What do you think is next for you? What are you planning? I mean, obviously school,
yeah.
but what
So
else?
I'll be getting my Master of Philosophy in Film and Screen Studies at the University of Cambridge, starting in September. And then after that, it'll either be coming back to Harvard to work on my PhD, or going back to Hollywood and maybe doing a little city council, a little acting on the side, or maybe a little city council on the side, acting of the main gig, helping out Tim with the cake shop. And I think if I were to settle down, it'll probably be West Hollywood. That's home to me. But according to my friend's 70-year-old psychic, I'm going to meet the man of my dreams in Cambridge, UK. So, who knows? I may just that's it. Like life, we can make all the plans in the world, but life is going to take you the way it's going to take you. Like the universe has already plotted out your path. So has Liam read your book or reached out to you? I don't think he read part of it. My friend Cherry actually gave him the book one night, pretty soon after it was released. And when we talked a couple of years ago, he did say he read some of it, and he said that I looked really good now. He actually is sober. I think he's been sober now 2-3 years. So yeah, I'm happy for him. But we'll see what happens in book number 3. He probably won't be mentioned in the Harvard book. Maybe in the prologue, just a little bit of what happened in the last 2. But yeah, I haven't talked to him in years. but I have been watching to see how he's doing.
Well, hopefully that chapter will end when you meet the love of your life in your Cambridge journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll have to book number 4. Oh, 1 year in Cambridge. I don't have the rest of it yet, but there's gonna be 1 year in Cambridge and the psychics foretelling or something.
Yes, get a little mysticism in there too. That'd be awesome.
There's some mysticism in the sequel, by the way.
You keep teasing it, and now I wish I read it for this this event. I'm getting it. I'm buying it on Amazon right now.
And sometime, next year we'll do another author spotlight, an alumni spotlight. Yeah, exactly.
Well, unless anybody else has any other questions, I just want to thank you for giving us your time tonight. I had no idea what to expect tonight because you are such a multifaceted individual. Everything that I've learned about you, I know that there's a million other things that I'll never know that you've done, incredible, amazing things. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and be here with us today to talk about your writing and your journey and sobriety and all of those other things. And of course, Creative Writing and Literature Student Society wouldn't be here without you. So we thank you for that as well. But thank you so much, Kody. A wonderful book. I hope that everyone here, if you haven't finished it yet, if you haven't read it yet, go pick up a copy and get to the end, because the ending is so beautiful and so worth it. So thank everybody for coming. Thank you all for being here and asking great questions. And yeah, thanks everybody.
All right, thank you all so much. I'm going to stop the recording.